Welcome to the Golf Improvement Podcast, episode 233.
Welcome to the podcast for golf lovers who are looking to shoot lower scores. Dedicated to professional club fitting, putting and short game improvement, and effective practice techniques to improve your golf game. This is the Golf Improvement Podcast with your host, Tony Wright.
Hello, this is Tony Wright from Game Improvement Golf in Oak Ridge, Tennessee with the Golf Improvement Podcast, dedicated to sharing useful information on professional club fitting, putting and short game improvement, and effective practice techniques. Changing golfers' lives, one golfer at a time. Recently, I've been talking on Twitter about Moment of Inertia, or MOI, golf club matching with good friend Keith Muir, who did podcast episode 231 with me. He sent me a link to an amazing MOI video posted by Jeff Sheets, a 40-year club fitter and club maker who's done 3 previous interviews with me. But I also discovered Jeff has posted a lot of valuable videos based on his golf knowledge and his connections in the golf industry. Jeff agreed to do this interview with me, and he'll share only a bit of the valuable information he's posting on his Instagram page. I can't wait to let you hear this one.
Tony Wright and Game Improvement Golf, changing golfers' lives, one golfer at a time.
Hello, this is Tony Wright with episode 233 of the Golf Improvement Podcast. And today we're going to welcome back for the 4th time Jeff Sheets with Jeff Sheets Golf. Jeff is a 30-year, and I found this on your Instagram page, okay? 30-year veteran club designer with more than 600 commercialized club models. He's worked with 60 major champions, is the 2024, you put 24 in there, Hall of Fame club builder. But today we're going to talk about some of the really valuable information that's on his Instagram page. So, Jeff, thanks for doing this with me.
Oh, thank you, Tony. Glad to be on. I didn't realize this is the 4th time, but
I thought it was the 3rd for some reason. I don't know. Yeah. I lose track, right? But they were all good. Yeah.
Excellent.
So what kinds of projects are you kind of working on now? And then share a bit about what really got you started to create your Instagram site. And I am in many ways jealous. Okay. I mean, you've done 253 posts. You have 18,000 followers. Now, maybe they don't all read every one, but that's a heck of a lot of followers. That's pretty cool.
Well, considering the subject matter, I mean, I'm not doing really flashy, exciting, entertaining things. I'm really doing posts about golf technology. And so of those 18,000 that have followed me so far, you've got to be pretty hardcore intense on golf equipment, because I'm not doing anything that's very entertaining. I'll flip through Instagram and you dive into a rabbit hole pretty easily with the entertainment, but that's not what my posts are about. I'm really just trying to share the golf knowledge that I've collected over the past 4 decades. On my Instagram site, I say 30 plus years of golf club R&D. That's really pushing almost 40 now that I'm really looking back on things. And I used to run the schools at Golfsmith for 10 years. I ran the beginning club making school, and I ran the advanced club making and the fitting school, and then I created the Master Craftsman program and ran that. And I've always enjoyed sharing knowledge that's helpful to other people. That's one way I kind of get charged up, is just helping people and seeing the joy that they get from learning something. Because most people I'm reaching out to, teaching, they love learning the information that I have. So I don't want to be a gatekeeper and keep that tied up and secretive. It's out there for the masses.
Yeah, that's really neat. I miss Golfsmith a little bit, but we don't want to dive into there too much.
Yeah.
I used to buy things from there, but now what got me started, how did I not find you? But a good friend, I don't know if you listened to the podcast I did with Keith Muir, he does a lot of putting things, sent me the link to the MOI matching video you posted, which I'm not sure there's a better video out there that I've seen, taking 10 minutes and going into a little bit of history and, what you think about it and things like that. So talk a little bit about, maybe some history, what got you started in a MOI matching, why you believe it's valuable, but you also note in the video you've had some experiences from tour van work related to MOI. And I'm going to give you a little backup there. I did some checking ChatGPT about progressive swing weights, and do tour guys do that or do they not? And the information is a little nebulous there. Do they not? But I don't know that you can trust it. You probably have a little more sense of that.
I do have some sense in the fact that I was trying to, okay, first of all, the gold standard for MOI matching is using the Golf Mechanics MOI matching scale. It looks to a lot of people like a swing weight scale, but unlike a swing weight scale, which is a static measurement, the MOI machine rocks back and forth, and it's measuring the moment of inertia of that entire club and how much resistance there is based on the head weight and static weight of the club. And the objective is you're trying to get every club in this set, whether it be the iron set, the wedge, or the wood sets. You want to get those MI matched so that the same amount of energy and effort that goes into one swing and ends up with a particular result does it with the rest of the clubs with the same result. And MOI matching has been around prior to the swing weight scale being developed. And it was all done mathematically, a very long algebraic equation that club makers in the early part of the last century would follow to build out a club and then a match set of irons. And the swing weight scale made this task much simpler, but it was no longer MOI matched. You had a constant, what they call a heft weight for each club if you're matching them to be the same swing weight. But if you were to take one set of irons and you put the same swing on them, you might be getting a fade with the short irons into the green and a relatively straight ball flight with the mid irons and maybe a little bit of a draw with the long, and yet you're putting the same tempo, the same energy into the swing, and swing weighting can lead to that. It also leads to favorite clubs within a set because sometimes you find that particular club. But that's what we do MOI matching around. Once you find that favorite club in the set, we go to that club, we look at the MOI of that, we look at all the other specs, but most importantly, the moment of inertia, and then we'll build out the set to match that particular club that's a favorite so that the same tempo, the same swing energy that goes into that club, you're going to be placing that to every other loft in the set. And the way I got deeply involved in this is not so much because Golf Mechanics has this MOI matching scale that you can build around. I was trying to create a non-digital version of that MOI machine using a swing weight scale or a swing weight type of scale. And I'm going to say I came very close. I was working with Mondare Lettieri of Golf Mechanics because he created the digital scale, and I worked for about a year with him on this manual swing weight type scale that doesn't plug in or anything. And we were getting close, but it was like 85% of the way there. And if it's not right, Mondare's not going to do it. And so through that process of just measuring club after club after club, trying to get things to match up between the digital scale and the manual scale, I did a lot of MOI matching over the years there.
Well, let me just jump in a little bit. When I first started doing things like in 2006, 2007, and you look at specs of regular clubs that are swing weight matched, right?
Yes.
The pitching wedge and the gap wedge would always be about 2 swing weight points higher.
Yes.
And then the sand wedge would always be roughly maybe 3 swing weight points higher.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure it wasn't just a year or so ago I realized, oh my gosh, that's a way to, because you really don't want those wedges to be the same swing weight as the other clubs.
Correct.
They're just not going to feel good. And so it's sort of hitting MOI at the back end a little bit, right?
A little bit at the back end, but doing the progressive heavier swing weights as you get to the pitching wedge and then the gap and the sand and lob, that back drives the MOI matching a little bit, but the whole objective is a little bit better feel as you get into those scoring clubs, and you're going to be doing a lot more chipping and pitching with a pitching wedge and a gap wedge than you are with your 7, 8, or 9 iron. By the time you get to your mid 50s, 54 to 56 degree club, all the way up to your lob wedges, none of those are going to be a full swing club. Those are all partial feel shots. And subsequently, we put more head weight in there, a higher swing weight, so that you are imparting more feel into the club. A good club fitter is going to also probably put a little bit softer shaft in there for those non-full swinging clubs. And so as you're getting a little bit heavier in the swing weights, you're getting closer to MOI matching the wedges there against the irons. But long before MOI matching has been recognized, heavier wedges have always been a trend, because especially as you get to those higher lofted ones, you're probably going to stop taking a full swing with your gap wedge. Everything else is going to be half, 3/4, chip, pitch, feel shots.
Yeah. Now, so back a little bit to my initial question too. I mean, I don't think that tour van people have MOI machines, but maybe they do. But they're just trying to find what the right feel is of clubs for them. And they're so sensitive, they know. And I've seen a number of instances where you take a tour player's clubs and they're darn close to MOI matched, even though they're not thinking about that. Is that right? Is that kind of what you have seen in tour van stuff?
I've had that experience firsthand, where sitting on the range with a tour player and lead tape, and not even using a launch monitor, just hitting the full shots, getting that feel. And then at the end, I'll ask, okay, let me go ahead and document where we're at here, because this really seems to appeal to you. And almost every time I've done this, we've ended up with an MOI match set of clubs. The swing weights aren't the same, but they have felt a progression in there. And they've found, through the tempo and timing and the energy that goes into each swing, they've got a result that they like. And I've even had this happen with a couple of amateur players, but they were competitive amateurs. Someone who really knows their swing and can really get into the groove can easily MOI match their equipment without even realizing they're doing it.
And the other end that I found with a number of people is the lower lofted clubs. I've had a number of times when all I do is kind of make the 3 iron or 4 iron or whatever for real good players a little shorter, take a little weight out, get it closer to MOI matched, and boy, they get much better contact with those clubs.
Yes, and now they're putting the same swing on the 3 or 4 iron that they're putting on their 7 iron, and the effort to try and end up with a result. Let's say you hit a little baby fade with your 7 iron, and you take your 3 iron, and you're like, man, where's that baby fade? It's just, and you're sitting there trying to manipulate it, and you finally figure it out, and then, but you're not swinging the same way. You're doing something to manipulate to the result, to end up with that same ball flight that you're getting with the 7 iron that you really like.
Yeah. It's, you know, I did MOI matching for more than a dozen years and so many successes. So people who listen, get on your Instagram page will really enjoy listening to that one piece. I think it's about 10 minutes long. But now, two things. One that you said was controversial, but maybe even the second one is a little controversial. Blades versus cavity back irons. You said some things there that were really surprising to me. And so talk a little bit about that topic and how blades have progressed, I guess, right?
Modern blades are definitely superior over those from yesteryear with a heelward CG and longer hosels and higher heelward CGs. But I went on the full journey. I took up golf in the mid 1980s. My first set of irons were some Ram Tour grinds, and so a set of blades. And once I found that I was working in the golf industry, especially on the equipment end, I had access to any product I wanted to. Being in the industry, working the equipment side, you go to someone at another company. Hey, can I get a set of those irons, or can I get that driver? And we're pretty friendly cross pollination here in the industry with the equipment, and so I could play with anything I wanted to. I was always reaching out. What's the latest and greatest club for forgiveness? And basically from around 1989 until right around 2017, I never touched a blade. I did notice that my game had changed over the years. I thought a lot of it was age. Sometimes it was lack of play. Working in the golf industry, especially on the equipment side, you can go long stretches without playing golf. You're just too busy working with golf equipment to actually go out and take the time to play. And a lot of industry professionals experience that. But I was helping a company build a fitting system that was all blades around 2016, 2017. And in 2017, because of the interchangeable shaft technology, it was my first time to really go back and relook at blades, because every time I picked up a blade over the past quarter century, it always had heavy, stiff shafts in it. And I don't play a heavy, stiff shaft. I play a regular flex shaft, and I've been playing graphite for many years. And when I started helping build out this fitting system, for the first time, I was able to put some lighter weight, more flexible shafts, more flexible for my swing than X100s or S4s. And
yeah, right.
And I'm a steel fiber 80 gram iron player. I still have one of the very first prototype sets of those 80 gram steel fibers when they actually said 85 on them, because they truly are an 85 gram shaft, but somehow they ended up, once they hit the market, they were an 80 gram shaft with an 85 gram spec.
Huh. Yeah.
Once I put those in a set of blades, it's like, wow, this is a lot of fun. I am hitting shots that I had not hit in many years, and realizing that the more offset, the lower center of gravity, the larger oversized head of those game improvements, game forgiveness, modern day irons were actually costing me shots that I used to be able to manufacture, somehow couldn't, and then suddenly with the blade, I'm manufacturing them again. And it got me looking very closely at, okay, what is occurring here with a center hit on a blade or cavity back versus an off-center hit? And from 2017 up until even today, the number of players that have converted from whether it be a player's cavity back to a super game improvement cavity back into a blade with tighter dispersion, better ball striking, it just it goes against everything that the golf industry advertises about forgiveness, high MOI, perimeter weighting. All of that stuff is just one big marketing story that the gullible consumer has swallowed and follows. But when you get down in the trenches, and you've done as many fittings as that I have had, and a lot of these fittings are people with handicaps over 20 and getting them into blades, you're going to see the results of what that solid mass behind the ball provides versus a thin-walled face that has all sorts of perimeter weighting. The loss in ball speed and energy on a off-center super game improvement head does not give you the same type of result as mishitting a blade. And having mass behind the ball is going to help keep that club head more stable and transfer better energy to that. When we look at, we've got all these thin, high-strength steel faces with high rebound effects, but because there's no support behind the ball, when you do that off-center hit, the ball's going nowhere. And so in that particular post that you're referencing, I dissect a number of heads of different constructions and talk about the mass that is behind the ball at impact, not just in a center hit, but an off-center hit. And I think a majority of people that have watched that post have come back and agreed. When I did that post, I was expecting a lot of controversy, and in the end, I was shocked at the lack of controversy of the number of people saying, no, you really need game improvement. Blades are for just the best players in the world.
So if you're listening, don't be afraid, because everything tells you, oh my gosh, I probably can't hit a blade, right?
Yeah.
And I'm the same, I haven't hit a blade in many years too. So I'm not even sure I ever played a set of blades. So it's definitely got me thinking. That was not really controversial, just sharing things that you knew. So it's pretty good.
Well, I've done some posts and have a lot of criticism has followed, and I was ready for it. I was expecting it.
Yeah.
And I was shocked at the lack of criticism.
Now, the other one that I found interesting, well, I found a lot of them interesting, but talking about your preference for taper tip shafts versus parallel tip shafts. And, I've done fittings with both. I've never had a bad experience with taper tip shafts, but somewhere down the road, I stopped getting what I'll call sort of anal about trying to match flex with parallel shafts. Okay. Mm-hmm. And just did tip trimming, and they were just fine for that particular set. But talk about the things that related to these two shafts, and why somebody really ought to look into hitting taper tip shafts.
Well, parallel tip shafts were created for one thing: convenience. And anybody that builds clubs knows that you can take a parallel tip 370 parallel shaft, and you'll tip trim it to whatever club in the bag it's supposed to be, and then butt cut it to final length. And if you're a big OEM and you just need to buy one SKU of regular flex and one SKU of stiff flex, and all that inventory comes in, and all you end up tip cutting and butt cutting to build out the sets, that's really convenient for the major OEM. And that's what these parallel tip shafts are all about: convenience. Taper tip are individual shafts for each individual loft. And historically, a set of taper tip shafts is going to be constant weight. So if you're looking at Dynamic Gold S300, R300, X100, or move over to Project X or KBS or Nippon Modus 3s, those are all constant weight. So if I'm going to be building a set 4-iron through pitching wedge, my 4-iron shaft is going to be the same weight as my pitching wedge shaft. Even though the pitching wedge shaft is going to be significantly shorter, you're going to have constant weight through there. Now, if I do the same thing with a parallel tip shaft, I'm not removing very much material from the tip or butt on the 4-iron, but I'm removing a lot of material from the tip and butt on the pitching wedge. Subsequently, my 4-iron shaft is going to be much heavier than my pitching wedge shaft, and it's going to progress like that through the set. If you want anything, you want the reverse. You prefer that 4-iron should be the lightest shaft, and the pitching wedge should be the heaviest. You can get those in taper tip. You can't get those in parallel. And so if you were to go through and look at all the taper tips that are on the market right now, they're all either constant weight or they're ascending weight, meaning light long irons, heavy wedges, and they progress subsequently. But with a parallel tip shaft, you're always going to have a heavy long iron. You're always going to have a very light short iron, and that progression is going to work its way as you get to the higher lofted clubs. So a lot of people can live with those parallel tip shafts because they're just weekend warriors. They don't see the nuances of what happens with your ball flight and your spin like a tour player would. When I started working out on the PGA Tour, I worked in the precision shaft tour trailer, and that was all frequency matched product. And we would build sets down to the cycle. Back then, I played a 6.3 frequency coefficient in my irons. And nowadays, you have the residue, the leftovers of that. Oh, a Project X 6.0 or 6.5 or 7.0, and they go in 5 cycle increments. But back then, we were really dialing these in. And there were a couple of occasions where I had to take some parallel tip shafts and build out the sets. Tour players know when you have put a parallel tip shaft into their iron head.
Wow.
All it takes is hitting some balls into the wind, and suddenly you've lost control at the apex of your ball flight. And I don't know how many times I've been out on back then it was the senior tour, which is now the Champions Tour. And for some reason, it was because the heads that were available, I had to use more parallel out there than I did on the PGA Tour. But the players are coming back to me like, you didn't put a parallel tip shaft in here, did you? Like, yeah, that's what we had. He goes, should have shimmed it. Should have. Give me taper tip and shim it. Do not put a parallel tip shaft in these heads. But those were the heads that were, Henry Griffiths was getting a lot of people playing their heads, and those were all parallel tip hosels. And so, yeah, to someone who's buying a set off the rack at Dick's or PGA Superstore, and they're playing a few times a month or once a week or something, and parallel tip shafts might be fine for their game. When you get a discerning player who's really trying to control their ball flight, regulate their spin, take control of the apex of their trajectory, and have that angle of descent where it needs to be to hold the green, you can't do that with parallel tip shafts. Taper tip is the only way to go. And so just to reinforce, parallel tip shafts are created for convenience, not for performance.
That's really and like I said, I had many taper tip great successes, a lot with Mizuno, right? Because I would I would rebuild Mizunos, MOI match, buy the shafts uncut, do them a 3/8 inch differences between irons, and they almost came out. I mean, MOI matched. It was very easy to MOI match a set like that, and people loved them. A couple people said, "What did you do?" So yeah. That's fun. Now, putter loft considerations, and actually, if you remember, you and I talked a little bit about this, but it's always been very interesting because I had a discussion with Dana Upshaw about things he did with putters, and basically it was to take the draft angle out of them so people aren't putting extra forces on the putter to make it sit square. So
yes.
So go back and talk a little bit about this again and what happens with a putter loft when you change it and how it affects what's called the draft angle and things you might do to adjust putters.
What you do to a putter when you adjust the loft also occurs with your irons and wedges. And that is for every degree of loft that you add or remove, that draft angle you're talking about, the sole is going to also be altered that same amount. So let's say I have a 3.5 degree putter, and the golfer wants a little bit more loft. They just came out with a lesson from Dave Stockton. Dave's all about putting more loft in there, and they come back, I want another degree of loft added to my 3.5 degree putter. Okay, so easy. Take the hosel, we're going to bend it. There you go. We've got an extra degree of loft in there. You have a 4.5 degree putter, but it rolls shut. What we've done, we've taken the sole of that putter, which initially started off even to the ground with that 3.5 degree face. And now that we've added a degree of loft in there, we've added a degree of bounce to the sole of the putter. And first of all, statically, when you go to just rest the putter behind the ball, the face is going to roll in. It's going to close on you because that 1 degree of bounce that was added. If you can live with that, that's great. It bugs a lot of better players. But as you go to execute the putting stroke and you're coming through impact, making contact with the ball, to a lot of golfers, depending on how high that club head's off the putting surface, that sole's going to scrape. And that 1 degree of bounce is going to affect the dynamics of what's going on with the face of the putter. And it's going to be rolling it closed and shutting it down. And you've just now taken something that you thought is good, more loft, and turned it into something that's not performing to the level that you had hoped to. That's what put Scotty Cameron on the map back when he first started his own business. He saw what Ping was doing. The Ping rep would say, okay, we're going to bend your hosel this way or that way, and then go back out, and the player would hit the putter and go, okay, that's good. And all of those that were adding loft were getting the sole scraping. So when Scotty first started working with players out there, first of all, he'd have a meeting set up. So there was a certain time during the day that he'd work that person. But when he showed up, he had like 3 or 4 putters with different lofts on there. And when you found the loft you needed, it already had the proper sole that was not going to scrape the ground. And that's what kind of set him apart from everyone else that was out on the PGA Tour trying to fit putters to players back then. And that became the whole establishment of, hey, these putters roll really well. Yeah. Well, it's not from technology. It's from the fact that you got the right sole with the right loft. And, I worked with Scotty back when I first got off the tour and started working for one of the OEMs. And his shop was like a driver 7-iron from my house. And so we kind of did favors back and forth. He did a whole bunch of hand builds for me, for myself and my staff, and trade off iron sets and all that. But one thing he shared with me that was the whole foundation of his putters, that he would stand in one spot, rest the putter on the ground on a hard surface, and it had to be square. And then he'd rotate 90 degrees, do it again, another 90 degrees, do it again, another 90 degrees, do it again. So he'd do a full circle. And if that putter did not roll closed or open, you had a good setup there. And I kind of used that as the foundation of me moving forward with putter design and putter fitting. And a lot of people just don't understand the dynamics of what happens if you go to tweak the loft on your putter. Now, more people take loft off than put on. And so what happens there, let's say we've got that 3.5 degree putter that we started with. Someone wants another degree off of it. Bring that down to 1.5 degrees. What we've done is we've affected that sole by that draft that you're discussing, and we've modified that draft to where now when we set the putter on the ground, it's going to roll open. But a lot of better players can deal with a putter that rolls open, and they just square it up and then follow with their putting stroke. Because that draft angle is relieved and has less bounce, you can live with that putter much easier. That's how Ping survived so long out on the PGA Tour with these Justin Hosels back in the 70s, 80s, early 90s, because most of the players were going with a little less loft than more, and subsequently could live with that draft angle that was relieved, and subsequently the putters would roll open, but they'd perform just fine when you squared them up and executed your putting stroke.
Yeah. Well, the next thing we were going to talk about was sort of history, and I don't know if you want to say any more about Scotty Cameron and things, but you also had a neat post about Garen Reif and grooves on putters, and I should have realized Dean Knuth did what he did because I had some of those drivers right when that was 3 or 4 years ago, and I think you were part of the design of it.
Yes.
But I didn't realize what his role was in the USGA handicap system. So if you want to talk a little more about Scotty, go ahead. But for sure, Garen Reif and Dean Knuth.
Well, let's start with Dean. He's the lesser known, but the most. This guy has an impact on anybody keeping score. Dean Knuth is a retired U.S. naval captain who created some engineering technologies are still being used in submarines today. So, prior to golf, he had a pretty outstanding career as a U.S. naval officer. But let's fast forward to retirement. He ends up working for the USGA and establishes the USGA handicapping system, all the mathematics that is used to calculate and keep track of, and all subsequent modernization of that system over the past few decades. In addition, he also established the slope system and how you go and judge a golf course by its difficulty by measuring slope. Matter of fact, Dean Knuth is known as Pope of the Slope within the industry.
Yeah.
And so he is very instrumental in managing the way that we keep track of our scores, keep track of our handicaps. We look at courses from a strategic standpoint and apply those handicaps, and not enough people know who he is. I had the pleasure of working with him and his partner, Steve Tratner. Both worked for the USGA. Dean sat on the USGA executive committee, and Steve Tratner was the legal attaché that the USGA used for all trademark situations. The two of them got together and started a company called Knuth Golf, and from that we created a driver that, well, not a driver, fairway woods hybrids that were basically goes against the flow of what engineering says a driver or any metal wood face should do, which is hotter towards the edges versus being hottest in the center. And in 2016, the USGA altered the rules to say, yes, the center of the face can have a CT of up to 257, but the heel and toe can go up to 275, meaning you have greater trampoline effect out toward the heel and toe than you do in the center of the face. And if you maximize the face to 257, then you're really gaining a benefit by going 275 CT out on the heel and toe for amateur golfers and off-center hits. And so that is kind of Dean Knuth's legacy, is definitely the influence of the handicap and slope system, but also being behind a product that we created that just goes against all engineering faculties. Hotter as you get away from the center of the trampoline.
Yeah. Now, how about Garen Reif then, too? I thought that was a fascinating story, and I didn't realize he did what he did or started what he did, right?
Yeah, well, Garen, just like Dean Knuth, Garen had a pre-golf career that was very, very interesting. And he had worked in advertising in Chicago, doing major campaigns before coming over to the golf industry and getting into where he was just really emotionally at as far as golf equipment and in particular putters. I met Garen at the 1996 PGA show.
Oh my!
I was at that time I was director of R&D at Spalding Sporting Goods, and our premium product back then was Top Flight. That's before it came an in-house brand and a value line. And this individual comes up to me at the PGA show and asks if I'd give him the time of day to discuss a putter technology, and it was a bruise on the face of a putter. And that was the start of a very long friendship, a very deep friendship. He's probably my best friend in the golf industry up to this day. And he had gone to every OEM at the PGA show and couldn't get a single meeting. And I was the only one who gave him the time. And I very intrigued with what he was bringing to me. And it just seemed like a really genuine, great human being. And we eventually licensed that groove technology into the Top Flight microgroove putters, which were introduced in 97. And after doing a licensing deal with Spalding for a few years, he went out on his own and established his own company. And the one that most people became familiar with was Rife Putters, Rife Golf. They've been the number one putter on the Champions Tour all through the late 90s and early 2000s. And he developed the two-bar putter in the early 2000s, which was a tremendous seller before he moved on and reestablished what is now today even roll putters. And even roll is it's a fantastic company with fantastic engineering, fantastic design. I cannot give him enough props on what he does with the development of the even roll putters. Anybody that's familiar with the product line, he doesn't have a team. Everything is Garen. All design, even all the marketing, because as I mentioned in a previous life, he lived in the advertising and marketing world. And so everything that you see as a reflection of even roll is a reflection of Garen Rife. Yes, he has a lot of support. He has a lot of people on his team, but in the end, all the creativity, it goes to one man, Garen.
And I didn't realize that. I thought maybe he had stepped back a little bit, but wow, that's interesting for sure.
No, he has not stepped back. I keep getting on his case. I go, you got to get out there and travel more. And he's like, oh yeah, just I got this one other thing to do. There's one other thing to do. And there's always something in front of him before he can get on to the fun in life.
Well, as I started, I noted you had 253 posts. I think we're not going to talk about the other, 200, but if there's one or two other ones that, you really think are worth talking about today. And of course we can come back sometime, but talk some about those. You have club building tips, wedge grinding tips. I mean, just an amazing amount of things on the page. So,
yeah, I'm you brought up the Dean Knuth and Garen Rife thing. I call those history lessons, and I also did his history lesson on how Scotty Cameron came about. There's going to be more of those coming down the line. I mean, there's so many interesting individuals in this industry that I've had the pleasure to work with, and I'm not going to do a history lesson on someone I didn't work with. They're all going to be, whether it's Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus, or it's going to be Gary Adams that founded TaylorMade, or Bob Mandrella, who is Wilson and is behind every single staff blade for a 50-year period of time. I've got posts I'm going to do on these individuals because I think a lot of people today don't know much about them. A lot of them haven't heard about them. But in the golf industry, these are historical figures. And so there'll be more of the history lessons coming out on different people. I did do that whole series on what I call the 90-second grind. When I ran the Golfsmith Master Craftsman schools, one of the focuses in there was grinding wedges and irons, and that always seemed to be a very challenging thing for a lot of club fitters and club makers to approach. And I've done this series, and I call it the 90-second grind. I've capped these things all at 90 seconds or shorter, trying to show simplicity on grinding, not the complexity. And yes, when you grind a sole of a club, you need to have a bounce spec. You need to have a dimension width spec. You need to have a weight spec. You need to have all these things. But sometimes just putting the grind in there is a very little easy thing to do. And I'll in those videos, okay, you're only going to remove 1.5 grams on this, meaning, okay, this is not even going to be a full swing weight impact to the final club. Here's how you do it. And so I've done a series of those, and I'm going to do a series of more club building tips. I've kind of avoided it because when I go online and I see all these other posts of people building clubs, I mean, it's pretty common material out there. But about a week or so ago, I did one that I basically labeled as a Puzzle Prep 101. And I came out and said, okay, you've never done a golf club before, and you're going to reshaft it. You're a beginner at this. This is some information you need to know about prepping the hosel for the reshaft. And the amount of responses that I've got from that is making me realize I've got a lot of people out there that follow me that have never done this before, and they've come back saying, can you do more of this stuff, more series of these, entry-level things to do? And so there's going to be a lot more content that's going to be very basic. How to get into this? What does it take to graphite shafts versus steel shafts and stuff like that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a fabulous amount of content there, and I look forward, now that I know you're there, every couple of days, to be honest, I look and see if there's something new. So it's been great to do this. I mean, I thank you. I have to thank Keith. I would have never found you, and that would have been terrible. Not that I wouldn't, maybe I would have, right? But there's so much on there that's valuable, golfers, but club builders and fitters, and it's just fun information. So I'm going to put, like I always do, links in the show notes. I'm going to how to get on your Instagram page and get on your website. But man, just keep doing this. It's really, people who build clubs and things are always looking for information. So it's well worth it. Thank you, Jeff.
It's been my pleasure, Tony. Thank you for having me on your show.
Tony Wright and Game Improvement Golf, changing golfers' lives, one golfer at a time.
Jeff, what a service you're providing to the golf community in sharing knowledge from your 40 years in the golf industry and in sharing history lesson time videos about some of the well-known golf industry people you've known. Thanks for what you're doing, and keep it up, please. And yes, I bought a lightly used Wilson Blade 8-iron head, and I plan to build it soon and test it against my present iron. This should be interesting. I put links in the show notes to where you can subscribe to Jeff's Instagram page, which is @JeffSheetsGolf, and also to his webpage. You won't regret learning more from the information he's sharing. I have 2 shout-outs today. One is to Dave Tuttleman, who wrote the very first article that I read on the history of MOI and swing weight matching, more than 10 years ago. I've provided the link to this article in the post. It's still so interesting to me that almost 140 years ago, golf club builders were attempting to MOI match sets of clubs. The principles of physics are timeless. The second shout-out's related to the concept of heart math, This was discussed a bit in the last episode I did with Tom Sterner. I reached out to the HeartMath folks, and they've actually provided me with a subscription to their online training materials. So far, these are very interesting. I provided a link here to where you can learn more about HeartMath. If you click the link in the show notes for this episode, you'll see all of my favorite previously published podcast content. I hope you'll subscribe to my YouTube channel and also like the episodes you listen to through YouTube. Thanks. Well, that's it for today. I'll be back soon, probably in less than a month, for another podcast episode. But until then, take care. God bless and protect Ukraine. And God bless America.
Game Improvement Golf. Changing golfers' lives, one golfer at a time. www.gameimprovementgolf.com